The old mahogany dresser had been in his wife's family for generations, a heavy, dark beast of a thing that crouched in their bedroom, hoarding secrets in its dovetailed joints. Liam had never liked it. It was ostentatious, a piece of furniture that seemed to look down on the rest of their more modern, understated decor he had chosen and paid for. He was adjusting one of the drawers that had stuck, a common malady for the ancient piece, when his fingers brushed against something small and cool, wedged deep in the back corner beneath the velvet lining. He thought it was a fallen cufflink, perhaps a lost earring, but as he worked it free, his blood began to cool. It was a phone, a cheap plastic burner phone, the kind you buy with cash at a corner store and discard without a second thought. It was off. He pressed the power button, and the screen flickered to life, asking for a 4-digit PIN. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A burner phone, hidden. Why would Clara, his wife of 7 years, need a secret phone? His mind, analytical and trained to see patterns, raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. He tried her birthday, 0814, access denied. He tried their anniversary, 1022, access denied. He tried the last 4 digits of his own phone number, a small, hopeful prayer. Nothing. Then, a cold dread settled in his stomach as he remembered a conversation, a joke she'd made at a party months ago about the address of her first apartment, the one she'd loved so much before they met. My lucky numbers, she had called it. He slowly typed in 2519. The phone unlocked. The screen was stark, populated by only a few basic apps, messages, contacts, a simple browser. There was only one contact saved, M. Liam's hand was shaking as he opened the message thread. It scrolled back and back and back. A week, a month, a year. He kept scrolling, a sick, dizzying vertigo overtaking him as the digital ribbon of their secret life spooled out before him. 3 years. 3 years of messages were inside. The first one he read, from just 2 days ago, was simple. Can't wait to see you. Counting the hours. I love you. It was signed with a heart. It was not from him. Liam sank onto the edge of their bed, the heavy dresser looming over him like a tombstone. He thought he knew his wife. He thought he knew his life. He didn't know that for 3 years he had been a ghost in his own marriage, the silent, unsuspecting financier of his own betrayal. Within a month, her entire world, a world built on his quiet labor and her family's arrogant assumptions, would be reduced to ash. If you've ever felt underestimated or unappreciated, if you've ever had that gut feeling that something isn't right, then you know the cold place Liam was in right now. Do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe, because you're going to want to see how this unfolds. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to it. The old mahogany dresser had given up its secret, and Liam was about to begin a very quiet, very deliberate war. The phone felt alien in his hand, a venomous creature he had found nesting in his home. He began to read, not from the most recent messages, but from the very beginning. He had to understand the foundation of the lie. The first messages were dated almost exactly 3 years and 2 months prior. They were cautious, flirtatious. M, who he would soon learn was Marcus Thorne, a real estate developer Clara had met through her father, was charming, effusive. Clara was receptive, flattered. Liam felt a pang of something more painful than anger, pity. He remembered that time. He had just launched his consulting firm, or so he'd told her. The reality was far more complex. He had just secured the final round of Series A funding for his financial technology startup, Aperture Analytics, a company he had been building in secret for years. The hours were brutal. He was exhausted, pouring every ounce of himself into a dream he couldn't yet share, wanting to present it to her whole and complete, a gift. He had thought her slight distance then was in response to his own preoccupation. He saw now it was because she was already turning toward another son. As he scrolled through the first few months of messages, a timeline of his own life ran parallel in his mind. June, 3 years ago. Marcus, saw you at the club today. You were a vision in white. Clara, you're too kind. Richard was holding court as usual. Liam remembered that day. He'd been in a stuffy boardroom for 14 hours, negotiating server contracts. He'd come home to an empty house, with a note from Clara saying she was at the country club with her parents. He had eaten leftover takeout, alone. August, 3 years ago. Marcus, let's get away, just for a day. My place in the mountains? Clara, I can't. Liam has a work thing, but I could maybe have a spa day with my mother. Liam remembered that spa day. He remembered encouraging her to go, telling her she deserved a break. He had spent that Saturday configuring a new security protocol for his platform, a breakthrough that would eventually be worth millions. He recalled feeling a quiet satisfaction, believing he was building a secure future for them both. The irony was a physical weight, pressing the air from his lungs. The betrayal was staggering, but it was the casual cruelty that truly gutted him. They talked about him. They mocked his quiet nature, his simple car, a reliable sedan he drove because it was practical, not because it was all he could afford. They called him the accountant. Clara, the accountant is buried in spreadsheets again. He wouldn't notice if I painted the house purple. Marcus, let him count his little beans. You belong in a world of champagne and sunlight, my love. His little beans. Those little beans were algorithmic trading models that were, at that very moment, outperforming every major hedge fund in the sector. The sedan they laughed at was parked in the garage next to a classic 1967 Aston Martin DB6, covered by a tarp, a personal passion he'd never felt the need to flaunt. His entire life with Clara, he realized, had been a performance. He had played the part of a modest, moderately successful consultant because he had wanted to be loved for who he was, not for the wealth he was accumulating. He had wanted a partner, not a beneficiary. What he had gotten, it seemed, was a parasite, and her family was complicit. He found messages between Clara and her mother, Margaret. Clara, I feel so guilty sometimes. Liam is a good man. Margaret, good doesn't pay for a summer in the Hamptons, darling. Marcus is a man of stature. Liam is stable. There's a difference. A woman must be practical, just be discreet. Her brother David was in on it too. David, saw you with Thorne at the regatta. Bold move. Does the accountant know you were even there? Clara, he thinks I was at a charity luncheon. Don't worry, David, I've got it handled. They were all in on it, the entire family. The condescending smiles from his father-in-law Richard at family dinners. The pitying looks from Margaret. David's smug, backslapping familiarity. It wasn't just disdain for his perceived lack of ambition. It was active, gleeful deception. They were a pack, and they had been feeding on him for years. Liam carefully placed the burner phone back where he found it, nestled deep beneath the velvet liner. He smoothed the fabric, closed the drawer. His hands were steady now. The shock had burned away, leaving behind something cold and hard and perfectly clear. They thought he was a simple man, an accountant counting his little beans. They had no idea he was a mathematician, and he was about to calculate the exact cost of their treachery. He would not be emotional. He would not be rash. He would be strategic. He would let them continue to underestimate him, to mock him in their secret messages, to look down on him from their crumbling pedestal of arrogance. He would play his part, the quiet, oblivious husband. And all the while, he would be building his case, gathering his evidence, and preparing the board for a game of chess they didn't even know they were playing. The first move had been theirs. The checkmate would be his. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in self-control. Liam moved through his life with a placid exterior that belied the storm raging within him. He was an actor playing the role of himself, a man who still loved his wife, who still respected her family, who was still blissfully unaware of the chasm that had opened beneath his feet. Each night after Clara was asleep, her gentle breathing a soft rhythm in the quiet room, he would slip out of bed. He would go to his home office, the one they all thought was for his modest consulting work, and he would open his laptop. First, he would manage the real work, overseeing the final stress tests on a new predictive market analysis tool for Aperture Analytics, a project involving teams in London and Singapore. His company, his real life, was thriving in the dark, a vast and powerful root system growing unseen. Then he would turn to the other work, the grim work. He had used a small, undetectable device to clone the burner phone's SIM card. He now had a live feed of every message, every call, right on his secure laptop. He didn't need to risk retrieving the physical phone ever again. He created a file, encrypted and stored on a server that existed only as a string of code in a Swiss data fortress. He named it Project Reckoning. Inside, he compiled the evidence with the detached precision of an auditor. Every message was screenshotted, dated, and cross-referenced with his own calendar and financial records. Message from Marcus to Clara. Thinking of you. Wish we were in Paris. Dated October 12th. Liam's annotation. Cross-referenced with Amex statement. Charge for $8,240.50 at Le Grand The Four restaurant, Paris. Clara claimed this was from her girls' trip to celebrate a friend's promotion. Bank records show her friend was in Chicago that week. Message from Clara to her mother, Margaret. Marcus is buying the penthouse at the new Elysian Tower. He wants my input on the interior design. It's breathtaking. Liam's annotation. The Elysian Tower project is being financed by Sterling Cole Bank. Aperture Analytics holds a controlling interest in their parent investment firm. I can access the loan covenants. Message from her brother David to Clara. Dad is really leaning on me to close the Henderson deal. He's so stressed. Says if this doesn't go through, the company is in real trouble. Liam's annotation. Patterson Holdings, Richard's company, is massively overleveraged. The Henderson deal is their only path to solvency. Henderson Corp is one of my private clients. I have a meeting with their CEO next Tuesday. It was all there, a vast and intricate web of deceit, financial desperation, and social climbing. Her family wasn't just arrogant, they were drowning. Richard's company, which he paraded as a legacy of success, was a house of cards. David's job, which he held over Liam as a mark of his superiority, was a sinecure dependent on his father's failing enterprise. Margaret's social standing was propped up by the appearance of wealth they no longer truly possessed. And Clara was their escape plan. She was meant to secure Marcus Thorne, the wealthy developer, and tether their sinking ship to his rising star. Liam wasn't just the man she was betraying, he was the man she was waiting to leave, the placeholder until a more profitable option was secured. The daily humiliations became easier to bear, transformed from painful barbs into valuable data points. 2 weeks after finding the phone, they went to the weekly Sunday dinner at her parents' house. It was a ritual he had once found comforting, a sign of family. Now, it felt like walking into a theater to watch a play where he was the only one who didn't know his lines. Richard sat at the head of the table holding a glass of wine that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. He swirled the deep red liquid, peering at Liam over the rim. Liam, he began, his voice dripping with condescension. I was talking to a friend of mine on the board at the bank. He mentioned there's an opening in the junior risk assessment department. Stable hours, good benefits. It might be a step up from whatever it is you do on that computer of yours. Something to consider. A man needs a clear career path. The table went quiet. Margaret gave Liam a tight, pitying smile. David snorted softly into his napkin. Clara looked down at her plate, a flicker of something, shame perhaps, or just annoyance, in her eyes. The old Liam would have felt a surge of defensive anger, a need to justify himself. The new Liam simply nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. Thank you for the thought, Richard. I appreciate you looking out for me. I'll certainly give it some consideration. He could almost feel their collective sigh of relief. He had accepted his place. He had taken the insult with the docility they expected. He looked at Clara, and for a moment their eyes met. He offered her a small, reassuring smile. She quickly looked away. The live feed on his laptop later that night showed her message to Marcus. Clara, dinner was excruciating. My father offered him a junior bank job. I nearly died of embarrassment. Marcus, soon, my love. Soon you won't have to sit through those charity dinners. We'll be in our penthouse looking down on all of it. Liam saved the screenshot. He added it to the file. Every condescending word, every dismissive gesture was another stone in the foundation of the world he was about to build, and another nail in the coffin of theirs. He began making calls, quiet calls through encrypted lines, to people who knew him not as Clara's unassuming husband, but as the enigmatic founder of Aperture, the man they called the architect in the quiet corners of high finance. He spoke to his lawyers in Geneva. He spoke to his asset managers in New York. He spoke to the CEO of Henderson Corp. He moved his pieces across the board, silent and unseen. They thought they were playing checkers with a novice. They had no idea he was playing three-dimensional chess, and his queen was already behind their lines. The game was almost over. They just hadn't heard the word check yet. The final month was a study in patience. Liam watched them, listened to them, and let them believe they were in complete control. He saw Marcus Thorne buy Clara a diamond bracelet, a delicate, glittering thing she kept hidden in the same drawer as the burner phone. She told Liam she had bought it for herself, a little treat. He simply said it was beautiful and that she deserved it. He then logged the purchase, traced the jeweler, and cross-referenced it with a wire transfer from one of Marcus's shell corporations. The bracelet was not just a gift, it was a transaction, a down payment on a future she was building without him. The symbolic object he carried was not a weapon, but a simple, brushed metal USB drive he kept on his keychain. It looked innocuous, identical to the millions of others used for transferring documents. But on this drive, protected by military-grade encryption, was a complete copy of Project Reckoning. It held the messages, the financial records, the annotated timelines, the proof of their shared lies. It contained the entire architecture of their downfall. He would sometimes touch it in his pocket during a particularly galling conversation with his in-laws, the cool metal a small, solid reminder of the truth he held, a secret anchor in a sea of deception. The tipping point, the moment he knew it was time to act, came not from a message, but from an action. He came home early one afternoon, a rare occurrence. He'd finished a series of international calls and wanted to surprise Clara, perhaps suggest a walk in the park, a phantom gesture of a life he now knew was a fiction. He found her in their walk-in closet, on the phone. She wasn't using the burner. She was on her regular phone, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. He heard his name. "No, I haven't told him yet," she was saying. "I have to choose the right moment. Liam, he's gentle. I don't want to be cruel." A pause. "Of course, I'm sure, Marcus, it's you. It's always been you. My father's deal with Henderson is closing next week. He'll be financially stable again. David will be secure. It will be the perfect time. A clean break." A clean break. She was coordinating the end of their marriage with her lover, timing it to the financial recovery of her family, a recovery he now knew was entirely dependent on his own hidden influence. The audacity of it was breathtaking. She wasn't just leaving him, she was using him as a temporary safe harbor until her family's fortunes were restored, at which point he would be deemed obsolete and jettisoned. The gentle man she didn't want to hurt was just a stepping stone. He backed away silently, his heart not breaking, but hardening. The last vestiges of sorrow and nostalgia for the woman he thought he had married evaporated. In their place was a cold, resolute calm. The chess game was over. It was time to knock over the board. He chose the stage for the final act with care. It would be the following Sunday at the family dinner. It was their sacred ground, the place where their power was most concentrated, where their performances of superiority were most practiced. It was the perfect place to dismantle it all. He spent the next few days making his final moves. He had a long, productive conversation with Mr. Henderson, CEO of Henderson Corp. He spoke with the board of Sterling Coal Bank. He messaged his partner and the public face of Aperture Analytics, Julian Croft, a man whose name was synonymous with disruptive innovation in the tech world. He gave Julian a time, a place, and a simple instruction: be ready. That Sunday, as he dressed for dinner, he felt a strange sense of peace. He chose a simple, well-tailored dark suit, nothing flashy, the kind of suit an accountant might wear. Clara emerged from the closet wearing a new dress, a vibrant emerald green that highlighted her eyes. The diamond bracelet from Marcus was on her wrist. "You're wearing the bracelet," he said, his voice even. She touched it, a little nervously. "Yes, I just felt like it tonight." "It looks lovely on you," he said, and he meant it. It was a perfect symbol of her choices. They drove to her parents' house in his modest sedan. The conversation was light, meaningless. He asked about her day. She asked about his. The banality of it was surreal. They were two actors in the final scene of a play, reciting lines from a script that was about to be set on fire. As they pulled into the long, curving driveway of her parents' ostentatious home, Liam touched the USB drive in his pocket. The air was cool. The sky was clear. It was a quiet night, the kind of quiet that comes just before a storm. The quiet before the storm. He was ready. The house was ablaze with light, a beacon of false prosperity in the encroaching twilight. Inside, the scene was exactly as Liam had envisioned. Richard was holding court by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand. Margaret was arranging flowers on the mantelpiece, a picture of domestic grace. David was sprawled on a leather armchair, scrolling through his phone with an air of bored entitlement. The air smelled of roast beef and smug satisfaction. "Liam! Clara! Come in! Come in!" Richard boomed, his voice a little too loud, a little too hearty. He was in a good mood, a celebratory mood. "We have some wonderful news to share tonight." Clara shot a quick, excited glance at her father, then a brief, almost apologetic one at Liam. He knew, of course, what the news was. He had arranged it. They sat down to dinner at the long, polished table. The crystal glasses gleamed. The silverware was heavy and ornate. It was a stage set for a drama of wealth and status. Liam took his seat, unfolded his napkin, and waited. "Well," Richard began after the first course was served, unable to contain himself any longer. He beamed at everyone, but especially at David. "As you all know, the company has been navigating some choppy waters lately, but a good captain always finds safe harbor. I am thrilled to announce that this morning we officially closed the Henderson deal." Margaret clapped her hands together softly. "Oh, Richard, that's marvelous." David grinned, raising his glass. "To Dad." He pulled it out of the fire. Richard's gaze settled on Liam. It was the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to assert his dominance one final time. "You see, Liam," he said, his tone that of a professor lecturing a particularly slow student. "In the real world, it's not about counting beans. It's about vision. It's about taking risks. It's about building something that lasts. The Henderson deal secures our family's legacy for another generation." He paused, letting the weight of his achievement settle over the table. This was Liam's cue to be impressed, to offer his congratulations, to shrink a little further in his chair. Instead, Liam took a slow sip of water. He placed the glass down with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "That's interesting, Richard," Liam said, his voice calm and measured. It was the first move. "Because I had a conversation with Bob Henderson this morning as well. He mentioned the deal had closed. He also mentioned why it closed." Richard's smile tightened. "And why is that?" "He said the terms were surprisingly favorable," Liam continued, his eyes not leaving his father-in-law's. almost charitable. He said that after his firm's analysts presented their findings on Patterson Holdings' debt-to-asset ratio, he was going to walk away. He described your company's financial situation as catastrophic. The color drained from Richard's face. David sat up straighter in his chair. "What are you talking about? The deal is done." "Yes, it is," Liam agreed, "because I asked him to do it." A confused silence descended. Clara stared at him, her brow furrowed. "You asked him?" "Liam, what are you talking about? You don't know Mr. Henderson." "Oh, but I do," Liam said softly. The quiet bomb had been dropped. "Henderson Corp has been a private client of my firm for 18 months. Bob and I play golf twice a month when he's in town. He was going to gut your father's company, David, and sell it for parts. I advised him that it would be more profitable in the long run to acquire it for a nominal sum and restructure it under new management. My management, to be specific. As of this morning, I am the majority shareholder of what used to be your family's legacy." He let the words hang in the air. Richard was sputtering, his face a mottled red. That's impossible. You're a consultant. You work from home." "I do work from home," Liam said. "It's convenient when your company, Aperture Analytics, operates in 27 countries. You know it as the firm that designed the trading algorithm that Sterling Coal Bank uses. The same bank that holds the loans on this house, on your cars, and on the financing for Marcus Thorne's new Elysian Tower." He turned his head slightly to look directly at Clara, whose face had become a mask of disbelief and horror. The bracelet on her wrist seemed to catch the light, a tiny, mocking star. "Aperture Analytics?" Margaret whispered, the name sounding foreign and strange on her lips. "The one Julian Croft runs? The one they call a unicorn?" "Julian is my partner," Liam said simply. "He's the face. I'm the architect. I prefer a quieter life, or at least I did." He reached into his pocket and took out the small, brushed metal USB drive. He placed it on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. It looked absurdly small and insignificant amidst the fine china. "Clara," he said, his voice now devoid of any warmth, "this is for you. It contains a full record of the messages from your other phone, the one you keep in the mahogany dresser. All 3 years of them. The messages with Marcus, the ones with your mother, advising you to be practical, the ones with your brother, mocking the accountant." He began his list of grievances, each statement delivered with surgical precision. "On June 14th, 3 years ago, you laughed with Marcus about my little spreadsheets while I was closing the deal that provided the seed capital for this entire enterprise. On August 22nd, you were at his place in the mountains on the same day I finalized the security protocols that protect our investors' data, telling me you were at a spa. On October 12th, you charged over $8,000 to my credit card in Paris with your lover. I've cross-referenced every date, every lie, every withdrawal. It's all in the file." He looked at Margaret. "You told your daughter that a good man doesn't pay for the Hamptons. You encouraged her infidelity because you thought it was a sound financial decision. You'll find your membership at the country club has been suspended, pending a review of your outstanding debts, which as of Friday, I also own." He looked at David. "Your position at the company was terminated this afternoon. My new management team felt it was redundant. I believe the term they used was spectacularly unqualified." And finally, he looked back at Richard, who sat slumped in his chair, looking 20 years older. "You offered me a job as a junior risk assessor. I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I have to decline. Assessing the risk of your family's choices seems a little redundant at this point. The results are in." The front doorbell chimed, a sharp, clean sound cutting through the suffocating tension. A moment later, the housekeeper showed a man into the dining room. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with an air of restless energy. It was Julian Croft, a man whose face was on the cover of Forbes and Wired. He nodded curtly at the stunned family and then smiled warmly at Liam. "Liam," Julian said, ignoring everyone else. "Sorry to interrupt your dinner. The Henderson transfer is complete. The Sterling Coal Board is waiting for your directive on the Thorne financing, and your car is here." Liam stood up. He looked at Clara, truly looked at her, for the last time. The woman he saw was a stranger, her face pale with shock, her eyes wide with the terrifying, dawning realization of the scale of her miscalculation. "A clean break," Liam said to her, his voice barely a whisper, echoing her own words back at her. "That's what you wanted. You're about to get it." He turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving his old life, the USB drive, and the ruins of their arrogance behind him. Julian followed, and the heavy front door closed with a solid, final thud. The silence that Liam left behind was heavier and more suffocating than any argument could have been. For a long moment, no one moved. They were figures in a tableau of ruin, frozen by the magnitude of their new reality. Clara was the first to break. A choked, incredulous sound escaped her lips. She reached a trembling hand for the USB drive, her fingers hesitating just above the cool metal, as if it were radioactive. "He's bluffing," David finally managed to say, his voice thin and reedy. "He has to be. Liam? The guy who wears sweaters from the Gap? It's a trick." Richard didn't answer. He was staring at the space where Liam had sat, his mind frantically replaying years of condescending remarks, of dismissive advice, of profound underestimation. He remembered Liam trying to explain a concept about market volatility once, and he had cut him off, laughing, telling him to leave the big picture to the big boys. He remembered every smug smile, every patted shoulder. It wasn't a bluff. The quiet confidence, the surgical precision of the details, it had the horrifying ring of absolute truth. Clara finally picked up the drive. Her hands shook so violently she could barely hold it. She looked at her mother, her eyes pleading for an answer, for a denial, for anything other than the dawning horror she saw reflected in Margaret's face. "The Hamptons," Margaret whispered, her voice a dry rasp. He knew about the Hamptons. It was a small detail, but it was a crack in the dam, and now the flood was coming. Clara stood up, knocking her chair over with a clatter. "I have to talk to him." She ran from the room, out the front door, into the cool night air. The driveway was empty, save for her father's luxury sedan and her own convertible. Liam's practical, much maligned car was gone. In its place at the curb was a sleek, black car she didn't recognize, something low and powerful. As she watched, it pulled away from the curb with a deep, throaty rumble and disappeared down the street. She was too late. She returned to the dining room, defeated. The family stared at each other, the accusations already beginning to fly in their shared glances. It was David who spoke first, his voice laced with panic and fury. "This is your fault," he snarled, pointing a finger at Clara. "You and your affair. If you hadn't been so stupid, so sloppy—" "My fault?" Clara shrieked, her composure shattering completely. "Mother was the one who told me to do it. She said Marcus was a better bet. She said Liam was a dead end." "Don't you dare put this on me," Margaret snapped, her carefully constructed poise crumbling into shrewish fear. "I told you to be discreet. I didn't tell you to get caught by a man who was secretly a financial genius." Richard slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "Enough," he roared, his face purple. "All of you, we have to think." But there was nothing to think about. They were cornered. Liam held every string. Their company, their house, their social standing, it was all his. They weren't a family anymore. They were co-conspirators in a failed coup, now turning on each other as the victor dictated terms. The first official consequence arrived the next morning via a courier. It was a thick legal envelope addressed to Richard. Inside was a formal notice of the acquisition of Patterson Holdings by a subsidiary of Aperture Analytics. It also contained a notice of immediate termination for Richard Patterson as CEO, citing malfeasance and gross financial mismanagement. His keycard for the office was deactivated, effective immediately. He was instructed to make an appointment to retrieve his personal effects, which would be packed for him. He sat at his polished dining room table, holding the papers, a titan of industry reduced to an unwelcome guest in his own former kingdom. That same day, Clara's phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice was frantic. "Clara, what the hell is going on?" he demanded without preamble. "The bank just called. They're pulling the financing on the Elysian. They cited a moral turpitude clause in my loan agreement. What does that even mean? They said the primary stakeholder in the investment firm behind the bank objected personally. The project is dead, Clara. I'm ruined." Clara sank onto her bed. "It was Liam," she whispered. "He knows everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus's voice returned, cold and sharp. "He knows? About us? Did you tell him about me?" The we had become a you and in me. The partnership was dissolving in real time. "He found the phone, Marcus." "The phone?" he hissed. "You idiot, I told you to be careful. My whole life is tied up in that project. You've ruined me." The call ended. Clara stared at her phone, the silence ringing in her ears. The great love affair, the escape to a world of champagne and sunlight, had evaporated at the first sign of trouble. Marcus hadn't loved her. He had loved the idea of her, an accessory to the life he was building, a life Liam had just bulldozed. The days that followed were a cascade of humiliations, each one a poetic echo of their past transgressions. The luxury cars were repossessed by a discreet but firm towing company, citing defaulted loans. Richard, who had once mocked Liam's sedan, now had to call a taxi. Margaret received a call from the chairwoman of the charity board she sat on, politely informing her that her presence was no longer required. Her social circle, built on the illusion of wealth, shunned her with brutal efficiency. News of Richard's company failing traveled fast. Clara tried to reach Liam. She called his cell phone, but it went straight to a new, unfamiliar voicemail. She sent dozens of texts, oscillating between desperate apologies, furious accusations, and pleas for mercy. They all went unanswered. She drove to their house, the home he had paid for, only to find the locks had been changed. A discreetly dressed man from a private security firm informed her that she was not to trespass on the property and handed her a box containing a few of her personal effects. The diamond bracelet was inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet. It felt cold and worthless in her hand. She was forced to move back in with her parents. The grand house felt different now, no longer a symbol of power, but a gilded cage. The atmosphere was thick with resentment and fear. They bickered constantly, their arguments circling the same drain of blame and regret. They were trapped together in the wreckage they had collectively built. About a month after that final dinner, a package arrived for Clara. It contained divorce papers, already signed by Liam. It also contained a financial settlement offer. It was not punitive. It was meticulously, almost cruelly, fair. He was offering her exactly half of the assets he had held under the name Liam Carter, consultant. It was enough to live on, modestly, enough for a small apartment, a used car. It was the life they had all assumed he was living, the life they had deemed unacceptable for her. All the wealth from Aperture Analytics, the billions he had built in secret, was legally firewalled as a premarital asset. He was giving her the life she had despised, while taking away the one she had felt entitled to. The message was clear. This is the man you married and betrayed. You are not entitled to the man you never knew. Attached to the settlement was a single typed note. It was not emotional. It was not angry. It was as calm and analytical as the man himself. "Clara," it read, "respect is the foundation of any partnership. It cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And once broken, it cannot be repaired. I wish you no ill will. but I also cannot allow the choices you and your family made to go without consequence. This settlement is based on the life you believed we had. I hope, in time, you find a way to build a life based on something more honest. Liam. The note was the final blow. It wasn't the revenge that hurt the most. It was the quiet dignity, the moral clarity. He hadn't lowered himself to their level. He hadn't been vindictive or cruel. He had simply held up a mirror, forcing them to see the reflection of their own character. And it was a sight they could not bear. Clara signed the papers. The great Patterson family, once so confident in their position, so secure in their superiority, was broken. They had underestimated the quiet man in the corner, and in doing so, had authored their own demise. 1 year later, the city's skyline was a tapestry of glittering lights against the deep indigo of the evening sky. Liam stood on the balcony of his new home, a penthouse apartment that occupied the entire top floor of a sleek, modern building he had designed and built. It was a space of clean lines, warm woods, and glass walls that invited the city in. It was a home built on truth, not appearances. The quiet life he had once craved was still his, in a way. He was still the architect of Aperture, but he had allowed Julian to convince him to take a more public-facing role. He found he enjoyed it, enjoyed the challenge of building, of creating. He was no longer hiding. He had spent the year not just dismantling his old life, but constructing a new one. Aperture Analytics had grown exponentially. He had launched a philanthropic foundation dedicated to funding education for underprivileged students in STEM fields, a quiet nod to the little beans he had once been mocked for counting. He found a deep satisfaction in it, a sense of purpose that transcended financial success. He was healing. The anger had faded, leaving behind a hard-won wisdom. He understood now that the betrayal wasn't about him, not really. It was about them, their insecurity, their greed, their desperate need to project an image of success they couldn't sustain on their own. He had just been a convenient resource to be exploited. He rarely thought of Clara or her family, but sometimes reports filtered back to him through the city's interconnected social and business webs. Richard had tried to start a new consulting firm, but his reputation was ruined. No one would back him. He was last seen having lunch at a cheap diner, a ghost haunting the edges of a world that had once been his. Margaret had retreated from society entirely, living a quiet, diminished life in a much smaller, mortgaged house. David had bounced between a series of low-level sales jobs, his arrogance stripped away, replaced by a sullen resentment. And Clara, he had seen her once, by chance. He had been walking down the street after a meeting, and he saw her coming out of a mid-range department store. She was dressed simply. Her hair was different. She looked older, tired. She was carrying a shopping bag, and for a moment their eyes met across the crowded sidewalk. A flicker of recognition, of panic, of deep, bottomless regret crossed her face. She quickly looked down and hurried away, disappearing into the crowd. Liam didn't feel anger. He didn't feel satisfaction. He felt a profound and quiet sadness for the woman she might have been, for the life they might have had if it had been built on something real. He turned from the balcony and went back inside. Julian was there, sitting on one of the low sofas, a tablet in his hand. "You ready for the Tokyo trip?" Julian asked, looking up. "Almost," Liam said, pouring 2 glasses of water. "Just needed a minute." Julian studied his friend's face. "You thinking about it?" Liam knew what he meant. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but it feels like another lifetime, like a story I read about someone else." And in a way it was. He was not the same man he had been a year ago. The quiet, underestimated husband was gone. In his place was a man who understood his own worth, a man who had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, more authentic. He had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true strength isn't about the power you display to the world, but the integrity you maintain when no one is watching. It's about being the architect of your own life, building it on a foundation of respect, honesty, and self-worth. The rest is just noise. The rest is just a house of cards, waiting for a steady hand to expose its weakness and let the wind do the rest. The story of Liam and Clara is a powerful reminder that what we see on the surface is often a carefully constructed illusion. True worth isn't measured in luxury cars or country club memberships, but in character and integrity. Liam's journey from quiet frustration to dignified vindication shows us that patience and strategy can be far more powerful than loud aggression. He maintained his moral high ground, delivering justice that was proportional and fair, not cruel. This allowed him to not only reclaim his life, but to build a new one founded on the authenticity he had always valued. What do you think? Was Liam's response justified, or did he go too far? We all face moments where we feel underestimated or betrayed, and his story raises a big question. What is the right way to stand up for yourself without losing yourself in the process? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so incredible. And if you found this story compelling and want to hear more tales of karma, justice, and redemption, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next story.